Did you hear that I started my own private practice last year? It was a big change that is going to require more changes in 2026, like some home renovation to create a real home office to replace my desk in our living room. Managing your money doesn't have to be a struggle this year. Monarch is the all-in-one personal finance tool designed to make your life easier. It brings your entire financial life, budgeting, account and investments, net worth, and future planning together in one dashboard on your laptop or phone. Start your new year on the right foot financially and get 50% off your Monarch subscription with code OFFTHECLOCK. Want a financial reset after all of that holiday spending? Monarch makes it easy to make a fresh financial start in 2026. I know I'm ready to review holiday spending and set fresh budgets for a financially fit 2026. I'm not a fan of New Year's resolutions because of how easy it is to quit new habits by February, but Monarch helps you reach concrete, achievable goals you'll stick to for all 12 months of the year. This new year, achieve your financial goals for good. Monarch is the all-in-one tool that makes proactive money management simple all year long. Use code OFFTHECLOCK at monarch.com for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarch.com with code OFFTHECLOCK.
One of the key points that I'd like to remind people of is that emotions, all of them, even the bad ones, we evolve the capacity to experience them for a reason. They help us when they are triggered in the right proportions. And by right proportions, I mean not too intensely or not intense enough. They're not lasting too long, also not lasting for too brief a period of time. When you hit that emotional sweet spot, even the bad emotions can help us.
That was Ethan Kross on Psychologists Off the Clock.
We are 5 experts in psychology here to bring you cutting-edge and science-based ideas to help you flourish in your relationships, work, and health.
I'm Dr. Debbie Sorensen, a clinical psychologist practicing in Mile High, Denver, Colorado, author of Act for Burnout and Mac Daily Journal.
From America's Heartland, I'm Dr. Emily Edlin, a clinical psychologist based in Chicago, Illinois, and author of Autonomy Supportive Parenting.
Calling in from Vienna, Austria, I'm Michael Herold, ACT coach, confidence trainer, and the author of an upcoming book on developing your confidence and social skills.
From Boston, I'm Dr. Yael Schoenbrunn, faculty at Brown University and author of Work, Parent, Thrive and an upcoming book about misunderstanding.
And from coastal New England, I'm Dr. Jill Stoddard, author of Be Mighty, The Big Book of ACT Metaphors, and Imposter No More.
We hope you take what you learn here to build a rich and meaningful life.
Thank you for listening to Psychologists Off the Clock. Ethan Kross is one of the world's leading experts on emotion regulation. He is an award-winning professor and best-selling author in the University of Michigan's top-ranked psychology department and its Ross School of Business. Ethan studies how the conversations people have with themselves impact their health, performance, decisions, and relationships. After earning his PhD in psychology from Columbia University, Ethan completed a postdoctoral fellowship in social affective neuroscience to learn about the neural systems that support self-control. He moved to the University of Michigan in 2008, where he founded the Emotion and Self-Control Laboratory. Ethan is the 2 times national best-selling author of Shift, Managing Your Emotions So They Don't Manage You, and Chatter, The Voice in Your Head, Why It Matters and How to Harness It. His books are routinely featured in the world's top media, have garnered multiple accolades, and have been translated into over 40 languages. Hey, Ethan, welcome to the show. I'm so glad to chat with you today.
It's an honor to be here. Thanks.
Maybe we can start at the ground level to get everyone on the same page and start by clarifying what emotions are specifically. What are we talking about? What are we trying to manage?
Well, that's a great question. And as you no doubt are familiar, that if you ask scientists that question, you're going to get lots of different responses. This is a huge topic of debate within the field. So the angle that I like to take is to focus on what scientists agree on emotions are. It turns out they agree on a lot. You can think of emotions as responses to meaningful things that happen to you at their most basic level. What do I mean by meaningful? I mean things happening in the world that are meaningful, like when someone honks their horn when I'm walking down the street, or even in my mind. We're exceptionally skilled at thinking about meaningful events of various sorts. And when a meaningful event occurs, an emotion is triggered. And you can think of an emotion almost like a software program that gets loaded up, and it's designed to very quickly help you deal with the particular kind of situation that you find yourself in. And these software programs called emotions are just remarkable because they have the ability to pull on various components of ourselves. And what I mean by that is they can channel our thinking. They can influence what we think about, how we deploy our attention, influence how our body responds. So if you're in a situation that calls for quick action, your heart might start ejecting lots of blood to perfuse your body with that crucial resource. Emotions can also impact the way we convey information to other people through our face and through our body language. And so emotions activate what we tend to just call a loosely coordinated response, a loosely coordinated response that involves cognition, physiological responding, and behavioral displays. I say loosely coordinated because I'm going to guess that you, Michael, have probably been in a situation where you were crying on the inside, but no one would have been able to tell because you were skilled at suppressing that reaction. Is that a fair assumption to make?
I wanted to say that my entire life could be described as loosely coordinated. But on top of that, yeah, that assumption would also be correct. I wonder how much I was able to convey what I was trying to get across, how much I was actually able to mask. But yeah, I can totally relate to that.
Yeah. So the idea is that these different response channels often cohere, but sometimes they don't. And that's okay. That's part of the beauty of our emotional system. It is fluid and flexible. And one of the key points that I'd like to remind people of is that emotions, all of them, even the bad ones, we evolve the capacity to experience them for a reason. They help us when they are triggered in the right proportions. And by right proportions, I mean not too intensely or not intense enough. They're not lasting too long, also not lasting for too brief a period of time. When you hit that emotional sweet spot, even the bad emotions can help us. So anxiety can alert us to potential threats that lie ahead of us and allow us to prepare for those threats. Anger can be an emotion that communicates that our understanding of what is right and wrong has been violated. And there's something you can do about the situation. So anger motivates you to approach it. All of our emotions serve that adaptive function. The big problem is that, as I think most, if not all, human beings have experienced more often than not, sometimes those emotions aren't triggered in the right proportions. They're triggered too intensely or not intense enough. They last too long or not long enough. And when that happens, the consequences can be quite severe. And so what I really do in my work and my books is try to understand how we can leverage the tools of science to help people manage their emotions in those circumstances.
I think anger is such a great example also for the software program that you used as a metaphor, because the moment this program boots up, anger, tunnel vision, very simple, very straightforward, this needs to get solved right now. And then contrast that with running another program that would just open our minds, like happiness, for example. Suddenly there's this wide view, there's this creativity that is allowed in, whatever might be connected to that sense of happiness. And I'm curious about a couple of things that you said. The first thing I wanted to double click on is when you said that emotions get triggered when something meaningful happens in our lives. Because I can do a lot of things during my day that are so benign that they are not emotionally laden. I am not afraid to admit that before our call, I had a couple of minutes to kill and I loaded up the washing machine. Totally emotionless, nothing to do with you, but that was not a meaningful activity. That was just happening. But now doing something meaningful, for example, having this conversation with you, now that will most likely trigger emotions because it is meaningful. And that is something that is so important, I think, to understand for everyone. Like, this should be something that's in the user manual of being a human being, is that if you do something meaningful, you better expect this to be laden with emotions. And here come the bad news, because if you do something meaningful for the very first time, most likely those emotions are going to be anxiety, worry, and maybe guilt afterwards, because it might be prone to some failure points in that very first execution of whatever it is that we're doing. So unless we're willing to go on that ride, it's going to be really hard to do meaningful things.
Absolutely. I mean, the question I grapple with quite a bit, I've written about this, I speak about it all the time, is I don't understand why we don't do a better job teaching people about these tools from the very, very beginning. You know, you can make the argument that an important part of parenting is to teach kids about how to manage themselves, socializing them in those regards. But that's kind of left up to figure that out on yourself. Most people are tasked with having to manage their emotions every day. And no one's ever taught them how to do it explicitly. We teach people about how to become physically fit from a very young age. The moment my kids started daycare, it was physical fitness. What about mental fitness? It's arguably as important as the physical side of the equation. Of course, it is a physical thing, right? There's a physical component to our emotions, but it just befuddles me why this is. I've been struggling with these experiences for as long as we have likely been roaming the planet, and we still struggle today. So yeah, being able to really live, I think, a purposeful, happy life requires these capacities. And, you know, I think it's also interesting to just contemplate for a moment just how relevant and salient emotions are in our lives. There's a study I talk about in Shift that profiled the anatomy of a person's emotional life. So they tracked these people over several weeks, I believe, and every day they were text message throughout the day. They were given a checklist of emotions. Are you feeling any of these things now? People reported feeling an emotion approximately 90% of the time. Surprisingly to some, actually, positive emotions were actually more frequent than negative emotions. A lot of people think,
oh, really?
Yeah, okay. A lot of people have that reaction. And I like to point out that's likely because, first of all, I think that's good news. We're happier than we are unhappy. That, of course, scaffolds onto some of the clinical statistics in this space. If you look at any individual depression, anxiety category of distress, it's not the majority. It's typically a significant minority, but we lose sight of that because of this principle that bad is stronger than good. The bad stuff in our lives looms a lot larger than the good things, which can lead us to sometimes think that our emotional lives are tinted a little bit more negatively than they actually are.
So back to the daycare, when we talked about your daughter in daycare, I was reminded of that fantastic study that you describe in the book as well, that the Needham study, which surprised me on so many levels.
Yeah.
Could you walk our listeners through that?
This is the Dunedin study in New Zealand. And essentially what these researchers have been doing for over, I guess, 50 years now is monitoring people as they develop. And they started assessing from the time that these kids were very little, their self-control capacity, their ability to manage their emotions, among other things. And then they looked to see, well, what does the ability to manage one's emotions predict? Turns out it predicts a lot of really great things. The kids and adolescents who are good at managing their emotions, they end up doing better in life. They end up being healthier. Their organs age less slowly compared to the individuals who were bad at managing their emotions. They experience more financial problems, worse health and relational outcomes. So I think that on the one hand speaks to the power of this capacity to manage our emotions to substantially influence our lives. But as I write about in the book, there was another silver lining to that study in terms of what we learned that is often not zoomed in on, which is some kids' emotion regulation trajectory changed over time. So some kids got better at managing their emotions as they aged. Some kids got worse. And as people got better, so did their other outcomes. As people got worse at emotion regulation, they went down on those other outcomes. And so for me, what that demonstrates is that this important capacity is malleable. You can actually do things to influence it. And I think that's a really exciting possibility to contemplate, based in part on those findings. My team developed a curriculum a couple of years ago to teach high school kids about the science of emotion. It took 2.5 months to go through this curriculum. They learned about this in their classroom in the same way they learn about math or chemistry or anything else. We did it with the entire high school, freshman to senior. We ran this curriculum in the context of a rigorously designed randomized trial. So classrooms were, by essentially the flip of a coin, assigned to learn about this curriculum or another curriculum we created on the science of learning. So still psychology, still science, but it's not about emotion regulation. What we find is that the kids who went through our emotion regulation curriculum, they learn the information more from the beginning to the end. So by the end of the study, their knowledge of how emotion regulation works, what tools exist, what are healthy tools, what are unhealthy tools, was much greater than when they started. So we taught them something. This is good. But what we also learned is that the more they learn that information, the more their GPA improved over the course of the study. And those GPA benefits that were linked with our curriculum persisted up to a year later, which is just, I think, one example of the potential that this knowledge can have for people on dimensions of their lives that they really care about. And if you're thinking about why would teaching a kid about how to regulate their emotions impact their GPA? Well, think about the frustrations inherent in studying, the temptation to be regulated to avoid doing things instead of studying, and so forth and so on. So we're really excited about that work.
Yeah, that is so fantastic, especially given that in that Dunedin study, it also became apparent that the ability to regulate emotions was even more significant than the socio-economic background or intelligence. So this is something that I am super happy that you folks are bringing this out into the classroom, as we here at Psychologists Off the Clock are trying to bring it out to the rest of the podcast listening.
Yes, we're on
population out there.
Same mission.
Hey, it's Michael with a quick announcement. As you might have heard, I'm writing this book about building confidence and finding meaningful connections. Last year, I invited a small group of podcast listeners to be a part of that process. Back then, I thought this would be a one-time experiment. But we had so much fun and I got to meet so many awesome people that I'm doing it again this year. So if you're feeling stuck in your comfort zone, unhappy with your social life, or unsure how to really show up in conversations, I would love to help. We would work together one-on-one for 8 weeks to help you build the kind of confidence that actually lasts. And if you're up for it, I may include a few small moments from our work in my book, or completely anonymously, of course, to help others feel a little less alone in their own process. And as a thank you, I'm offering 50% off my coaching package. If this sounds like a fit, head over to herald.coach/book and get in touch. That's all. Back to the episode. So before we go into what we're actually using to regulate emotions, I didn't pick this up from the book, but I picked this up from my workout routine, where my cardio training right now is accompanied by me watching the original Star Trek episodes. And there is a Mr. Spock, who, as we all know, is entirely motivated by logic. And since I have the opportunity to pick your brain on this, would a person that is completely separated from emotions, would such a person have a better outcome in life? Or would this turn into complete chaos or whatever negative outcomes?
So emotions play a vital role in our lives, and they're often a beneficial role. So, your question, if you could create a person who doesn't feel anything, would that be a good thing? And no, I don't think so. Let me give you a couple of examples. Perhaps the most powerful one are people who are born into this world every year incapable of experiencing pain, which is clearly an emotional experience due to a genetic blip. They are incapable of experiencing physical pain. And what happens to these people is they end up dying young because their hand gets caught in the stove and there's no signal that says pull it away. Or they scratch a mosquito bite to the point they keep scratching it, right? Until it gets infected. So it's just so critically important, I think, to remember that these emotions serve a vital function. When I think of presentations I've given that haven't been my best, they're typically when I've not had any anxiety beforehand. A little bit of
Yeah.
anxiety is a signal that alerts me to prepare for a presentation. If I don't have that anxiety, I don't prepare. Preparation takes work. And as a result, I show up and I'm not as good as I can be. So we could play this game with all of our emotions. Emotions also motivate us to do basic things like procreate, have kids, which is important. It's an emotional experience, falling in love, being in love with someone else. On the positive side, like that kind of empathic response and desire for connection, that leads us to have flourishing relationships, which are among the best predictors of longevity, according to science. So from multiple different angles, you do not want to strive to live a life free of emotion. What you want to strive to do is live a life in which your emotions are properly calibrated. That, I think, is what science tells us is the goal. It's certainly my goal for the life that I want to live. Like, I love maximizing the positive and minimizing the negative.
Now that the holidays are over, I am feeling the financial hangover. If you are too, Mint Mobile is here to help you cut back on overspending on wireless this January with 50% off unlimited premium wireless. Mint Mobile's end of the year sale is still going on, but only until the end of the month. So cut out Big Wireless's bloated plans and unnecessary monthly charges with 50% off 3, 6, or 12 months of unlimited. All plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. This January, quit overspending on wireless with 50% off unlimited premium wireless. Plans start at just $15 a month at mintmobile.com/POTC. That's mintmobile.com/POTC. Limited time offer. Upfront payment of $45 for 3 months, $90 for 6 months, or $180 for 12 months required. Taxes and fees extra. Initial plan term only. Greater than 50 gigabytes may slow when network is busy. Capable device required. Availability, speed, and coverage varies. See mintmobile.com.
As a therapist in private practice, I love seeing my clients, but don't love the administrative hassle. That's why whenever I give advice to a therapist starting their own practice, I recommend Simple Practice. Simple Practice is an all-in-one EHR that is HIPAA compliant, high-trust certified, and built specifically for therapists. I've been using it since I started my own private practice years ago. It helps me streamline everything. I send each new client a link, and then Simple Practice is my portal for consent forms, billing, appointment reminders, even my telehealth video platform. It makes running a practice so much easier because it frees up time for me to do the important stuff, seeing my clients. And I'm not the only POTC co-host who uses it. Emily does too, and Jill uses it to manage her group practice. If you're just starting out or growing your practice, there's also a credentialing service that takes the headache out of insurance enrollment, which honestly can be a huge lift. Simple Practice is trusted by over 250,000 health and wellness professionals, and you can feel that in how thoughtfully it's built for our work. If you're ready to simplify the business side of your practice, now is the perfect time to try Simple Practice. Start with a 7-day free trial, then get 50% off your first 3 months. Just go to simplepractice.com to claim the offer. Again, that's simplepractice.com.
Bringing this back to what you said earlier about emotions being a problem when and if they last too long, the duration is exceeding their use, and they come on too strong. So what we want to do with this air quotes wild horse is use emotion regulation techniques to tame it enough so we can put it in front of the cart and race off towards the horizon.
So I like to use the metaphor of physical fitness to help people wrap their heads around emotion regulation. I think we often hear that there are these 1 or 2 things you should do to manage your emotions. Meditate, be in the moment, maybe go outside. What we have learned is that there are no one-size-fits-all solutions when it comes to managing your emotions. Different combinations of tools work for different people in different situations, just like physical fitness, right? So my physical fitness routine involves like high-intensity interval training and, let's say some running. Now, that's very different from the way my wife keeps in shape or how my best friend keeps in shape. We have slightly different goals. We have different constitutions. And as a result of those differences, there are different combinations of exercises that benefit us. That is what we are learning is also true of emotion regulation. Different tools, different people, different situations. And so my goal is to really share that broad toolbox with folks, kind of like I welcome you into the gym. And what I want to do first and foremost is show you around, teach you about what are the different pieces of machinery and how can you use them, and then invite you after this tour to start self-experimenting to discover the combinations of exercises that work best for you. So what are these magical exercises? Well, they're not magic, they're science. And I divide them into two broad categories. There are tools you can use on your own. We call these internal shifters. And then there are tools that involve your relationships and the world around you, physical and cultural, and those are external shifters. So just to give you a couple of examples of the internal ones, sensory experiences, your senses, how you take in information about the world is a powerful way of altering your emotional response. My favorite tactic here is music. Music can shift people's emotions within seconds. What's interesting about music, though, is that although almost everyone agrees that they listen to music because they like the way it makes them feel, if you look at what people do when they're struggling with their emotions, across studies, only between 10 and 30% avail themselves of music as an emotion regulation tool. I was blind to this up until a moment I recount in the book when my daughter was a little bit glum before a soccer game, and just fortuitously, the world's greatest song came on the car radio, Journey's Don't Stop Believin', and we were both infused with positivity. And since that day, and subsequent research that we've done on this, I now view my iPhone as an emotion regulation device. I view when I travel internationally and walk through the duty-free shops, in my head, I've renamed those shops the emotion regulation emporiums, because what they sell there are perfumes and colognes, which are substances that their explicit purpose is to change the way you feel about yourself when you take a whiff, and also to regulate how other people feel about you. So all of your senses, sight, sound, touch, smell, they all have the capacity to push your emotions around. Now, the shifts that they provide aren't always long lasting, right? So the song stops and the emotions may come back. But that shouldn't diminish their value, because often it's just a little temporary reprieve that you need before you can either get back on track or use another kind of emotion shifter, which brings us to attention. So attention is, think of it as like your mental spotlight, right? And if you're focusing on the thing that's bugging you, it's going to bug you more usually. If you focus away, that can give you some relief. Now, the interesting thing about attention is a lot of us hear that you should never avoid your negative emotions, because if you avoid them, you'll get a temporary break if you're successful. But the moment you stop avoiding, the emotions will come pouring back. And there's a lot of truth to that. So there's overwhelming evidence linking what we call chronic avoidance with negative outcomes, right? So if I have this rule that every time I get upset, I'm just going to not think about it, just try to distract myself, either through healthy means or unhealthy means, that doesn't tend to work out very well for people. But we've gone from that observation that chronically avoiding things is bad to often assuming that any form of avoidance is bad. And that is not true, because your capacity to be strategic or flexible with your attention is a vital emotion regulatory skill. What do I mean by that? Michael, have you ever gotten an email that really pissed you off and you were very tempted to respond right away, but instead of doing so, a little voice inside you beckoned you to take some time away, and you came back to the email later that day or the next day and found you were able to respond much more constructively?
So I want to say that my hit rate with that is about 50%. So I am both familiar with the benefits of holding back, and I am also familiar with the disasters that might happen from hitting that send button.
Yeah, well, you and me both, my friend. The whole point here, though, is taking some time away and then coming back after you cool down can be super helpful. And that is a form of strategically diverting your attention in an emotionally arousing situation. So what I do in the book when I talk about attention is I try to give people some guidelines for how to know when they should turn their attention on or away or go back and forth. Sometimes over-focusing on a problem can be equally negative to chronically avoiding it. I mean, my first book, Chatter, was about that kind of over-focusing. You've got a problem. You really want to work through it. So you focus on the problem, but it just makes it worse and worse. That's a case of focusing on something not helping you. So you want to be strategic with how you deploy your attention.
The acceptance and commitment therapy approach that most of us on the show we use ACT. The approach here would be that of workability, of asking, like, is it helpful to do this right now? Or this thing that I'm engaging with right now, is it helping me towards my goals and my values to be the person that I want to be? Or am I screwing this up right now? And then go with whatever the answer presents. If the answer is this is not helpful, then, it's probably a good idea to stop doing what you're doing. And if attention shifting or sensory shifting or any other form of shift works in that regard, then by all means, go for it.
Yeah, that notion is actually embedded in this kind of guide in this chapter. When you're focusing away, do you find yourself continuing to think about this experience? Are you experiencing intrusive thoughts? If so, maybe you should turn back and try to work through it. And so that logic is very compatible. Let me shift, pun intended, to the third and final type of internal shifter. And I should point out for folks who are listening that each of these categories we're talking about, sensory shifters, attention shifters, within them exist a multitude of different specific strategies. So this is really just some kind of broad categories to be familiar with so that you can begin to wrap your head around the right approach. The final category is the one that I've personally spent the most time studying in my lab. These are called perspective shifters. The idea with perspective shifting is sometimes you've got to just stare at the problem. But fortunately, we've possessed the ability to alter the way we look at it. This idea will no doubt be familiar to folks who have heard about the importance of changing the way they think to change the way they feel. But as I also note in this very fun anecdote in the book, I was driving home from dinner one night with my wife and another couple, and my buddy was bemoaning the frustration surrounding a work-related issue. And his wife says to him, well, why don't you just think differently about it?
Yeah, just let it go. Yeah. This night's frozen, just let it go.
Exactly. And his response was, yeah, easier bleeping said than done. And he did not say bleeping, so I'll let you fill in the gap. And that's, we often find it really hard. And I think this is a real conundrum of life, right? Like, we know what we should do. We just can't do it. No one wants to be stuck stewing in something over and over. Sometimes maybe, but usually we want to get out of that state, but we just can't do it. What I talk about in this part of the book are the different tools that exist to help us change our perspective. And they tend to fall under the category of distancing techniques. So we can step outside of ourselves, and from a more distanced perspective, it's often a lot easier to look at the big picture and reframe our experiences productively. If you're wondering why that is, just think about the ease with which you can give advice to someone else on their problems, but struggle to do so yourselves. We're much, much wiser when it comes to other people's problems than our own. The cool thing is we've evolved mechanisms to think about ourselves like we were another person. And when we do, we're often wiser. So one technique that we've looked at, I've talked about in both of my books, is called linguistic distancing. So here you are using your own name and you to try to silently work through a problem. All right, Ethan, how are you going to manage this? What that does is you're relying there on language to shift your perspective. Most of the time that we use the word you or a name, it's when they're thinking about referring to someone else. Yeah. So when you use that technique to refer to yourself, those parts of speech, that's activating the mental machinery for thinking about others, which makes it much easier for us to be wise, sage advisors to ourselves. And there are lots of other techniques like this. Mental time travel is another example.
At Arizona State University, we've made online education better, smarter, and more personalized so you can go further in your aspiring field.
I decided to pursue medicine once I realized that ASU did have the online program for biological sciences. You're still required to learn the same curriculum. You're still being tested on the same content that anyone would be tested on in person. The comprehensiveness of the program prepared me so well for medical school.
Explore over 350 plus programs at asuonline.asu.edu.
So I want to tap into the giving advice to someone else. Yeah. And see like the underlying function of this, because in my understanding, the stuff that usually gets in the way between where I am right now and where I want to be. Usually the stuff that gets in the way are my thoughts, my emotions, my skills. Like what I need to do is uncomfortable. I kind of know like what I need to do, but doing the workout, doing the pitching, doing the whatever it takes to get there is inherently uncomfortable. And so that, in my understanding, is also the reason why it's easier to give you advice, for example, because I can tell you whatever I want to tell you because I don't have to deal with the negative ramifications of actually having to do it. It's easier for me to say, Ethan, you should just work out 3 hours a day than to tell myself, because that's going to be really uncomfortable. I don't care so much about you working out for the 3 hours because I don't have to do it. So that's a lot easier. So the power that I've discovered for myself in this linguistic distancing is that I specifically address the question of what Michael has to do in regards to dealing with the stuff that gets in the way, the thoughts, the emotions. So I'm not so much telling myself the outcome or the process to get to the outcome, but more like the process to deal with the obstacle that's in the middle, which is the discomfort that comes with it.
What makes, I think, this technique particularly helpful is when you are focusing on your own circumstances from a distance, you have privileged access to those obstacles that are standing in your way in a way that you don't when you're thinking about another person.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
Help, right? Like you've got to suss out, well, what is really the blockage here? Let me get to the bottom of this. What is it? You know, oftentimes what it is, but for a variety of reasons, you're unwilling or incapable of really grappling with that when you're in your first person emotionally infused default state. But taking that little step outside of yourself helps relieve some of that blockage to identify those obstacles and let you move on with things. So that's a linguistic shift. It's a really easy tool to use, which is why it's one of the first ones I use. Let me just mention two more. There are many here. Mental time travel. So I like this one a lot because oftentimes we hear that we should do our best to focus on the moment, be in the moment. Turns out, if that's your goal, good luck, because not possible. The mind evolved to travel in time, and it can often be a tool that helps us if you know how to leverage this capacity of your mind. So mental time travel into the future, what does that look like? Well, if I'm really distressed right now, I feel heavy, let me think about how I'm going to feel tomorrow about this problem, or next week, or 3 years from now, or 5 years from now. What that does is it makes me realize something I know to be true, which is our emotions come, they get triggered, and then as time goes on, they eventually fade. We lose sight of that when we're struggling with an emotion. We zoom in on in the awfulness of it. But going into the future, how am I going to feel next week, next month, next year? That automatically makes accessible this notion that what we're going through is temporary. And that gives us hope, which is powerful for allowing us to work through our emotions.
Now, that is the smart way of time traveling into the future, because what most people do when they think of mentally time traveling is the rumination, is the worrying, is all the things that will potentially go wrong if this thing keeps going. Like that's the shift.
Well, exactly. So unhealthy mental time travel into the future is what ifs. What if this happens? What if that happens? And my God, this is one of the worst gifts you can give people, what if thinking, because within 60 seconds, I'm projecting if I do this, like it's all over. This is a very different kind of mental time travel. What I like to remind folks of it is the following. Traveling in time in your mind is an essential feature of the human condition that serves us fairly well. This is what allows us to learn from past mistakes. It allows us to savor wonderful experiences we've had. It also lets us plan for the future in ways that are productive and fantasize about outcomes that have yet to occur that we desire. You can also get stuck, though. And when you get stuck in the past or future, it is a source of enormous distress. So something bad has happened. You lose someone you love, you're rejected, and you go back in time to understand why that happened, and your mental time travel machine breaks down. You become sad or anxious, whatever.
Well, it doesn't break down. Like this thing is incredibly sturdy. I think that's part of the problem with this machine is that you almost can't break it, but it will go off into the wrong
you lose control,
direction.
right? Like it just stays there. Likewise in the future, like we just spoke, right? You go into the future and you get stuck. And those can feel really terrible, those experiences. But number one, we should not throw the baby out with the bathwater. That doesn't mean you should not travel in time in your mind. It means you should travel more skillfully in time in your mind. Strategically going into the future, as we just discussed, is one way of doing it. You can also go into the past. Works a little bit differently. So I tell the story of my grandmother in my book who survived the Holocaust. When I'm really struggling with a problem, I go back to 1940s Eastern Poland. I spent some time with my grandmother trying to escape from the Nazis. I don't have to spend a lot of time with her there back in time for that to really help me put my current circumstances in perspective. Things could be much, much worse. And I like to tell people you don't need a grandparent who survived the Holocaust to benefit from mental time travel into the past. We've all dealt with adversity personally and know people who have. And thinking about some of those circumstances can be a powerful tool for helping us put our experiences in perspective.
And there's also a lot to be learned in the past as well. If I just think about my own struggles here in the here and now, just going back into the past and be like, hey, you've been there before. You've survived all of the struggles you had in your past successfully so far. You have never died once from any of those horrible things that may have happened.
Exactly.
And there are like 15 things that I can immediately start applying from what I've learned just by going through those experiences in the past and then using my time machine to go back there and take some notes metaphorically.
Exactly. And so those are the three big categories of emotion shifters. I mean, we've talked about probably almost a dozen tools within them across the senses, perspective, and attention. And that's typically like the first line of defense when it comes to managing your emotions.
Also because first line of defense, because as you try out what you've laid out in the book or what listeners you've heard here, you'll realize they are super fast.
Super fast, and you take them with you wherever you go.
Yeah. No journal, no like 15-minute walk necessary,
Exactly.
No 20-minute meditation.
And Michael, I think it's important to emphasize that like some of those other tools that you just mentioned, like going for a 15-minute walk or journaling or meditating, like I talk about these in the book. These are also really good tools. They're great. But what we know about human beings is we are all lazy creatures. And by that, I mean, the easier something is to use, the more likely we are to use the tool. And so it's important to have some of those simple ones because you're going to use them more. But you also want to know the more intensive ones too.
Well, you want your first line of defense to be ready and quick when you need it. So
exactly.
We will leave our listeners hanging with the external shifters. Let's give them the three shifters that you have just to tease them enough.
Yes. So there's a whole other universe of shifters. And just to kind of tease you with them, there are people shifters. So, I'll often, when doing talks or workshops in this, I'll start by asking, hey, are other people in your life really helpful for helping you manage your emotions? Almost every hand goes up. Then I go, I got one more question for you. Are other people in your life sometimes really destructive when it comes to helping you manage your emotions? Everyone's hand goes up. So what's the difference between a productive relationship or conversation about emotions versus an unproductive one? Turns out there's a science which guides us there, and you could find that in the book, along with other relationship hacks, if you will, for improving the way you feel. Then there are what we call environmental shifters. So the world around you, the physical spaces that you occupy, can impact the way you feel in really profound ways. And this ranges from the way you interact with your immediate spaces, the way you decorate your homes, to the places you visit when you're on a coffee break, to the parts of the city or towns you seek out when you're distressed. Right? There's a whole guide which can steer you to finding what I call emotional oases, restorative spaces that help you weather the emotional storm that we often experience. And then there's also cultural shifters. The world around us is constantly impacting how we experience and manage our emotions. Our parents are shaping our values and beliefs and giving us tools about emotions. Do we think you should manage your emotions or you shouldn't? Well, how do you do it if you want to? And our peer groups also impact the way we manage our emotions, as to the cultural institutions that we belong to at work, our religions, spiritual traditions. These are all potential resources that I think we often take for granted when we think about our emotional lives. But if you pause and think deeply about how they're affecting you, there's an opportunity to enhance the beneficial impact that they can have.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for your time, Ethan. This has been a huge pleasure and a huge honor.
It's an honor of mine being here. I really am. I'm grateful for what you do in terms of getting psych science out to the world. So thank you for having me.
Hi, listeners. I'm sitting here with my colleague and friend, Yael, to do a Potsy post-host discussion of my interview with Ethan Kross. And I believe when we first heard of his book coming out, Yael and I, we did this like Bugs Bunny thing of like wheels spinning on the dirt, like running forward, accelerating to see who would get him on. And the timing worked out to be in my favor, it seems. So we couldn't wait to...
Betrayal. I feel betrayed.
Yeah. It's a good thing I'm on the other side of the globe, so I'm not getting... But it was obvious that I needed to geek out about this interview with Yael. So tell me, what were your thoughts on my discussion with Ethan?
Well, the topic in general, I think, is such a powerful one. And honestly, it's one of the reasons that I was first attracted to the field of psychology, because the idea that we all have emotions and that some of us struggle more than others to manage those emotions is something that I have personally felt as somebody who grew up with big feelings. And one of the things that I've learned in my decades of being a psychologist is that the research and the practice of emotion management is really, really effective. And Ethan Kross's research is so cool. His writing is so accessible. And I just think that it is so hopefulness inducing for folks who struggle with feelings, with painful feelings, with big feelings. And I will say just from personal experience that this has been quite a journey for me in being somebody who's really interested in this research of emotion management, to try out these practices. And as a child, I really struggled with emotion management, that I've become quite skilled, not just in teaching it, but in managing my own internal experience. And so to me, it's like the power of psychology. And it's why I love what I do for a living. It's why I love doing this podcast, because the ideas that we talk about are really things that can make our quality of life better, not because we're dampening emotions, but because we're learning to use them to our benefit in ways that help us to be wiser and be more connecting and be more empathic towards others. So thank you for bringing him on. And it was a really wonderful conversation.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this conversation with him. Let me end this episode then on a quote that I think relates to what you just said as well, Yael. And this is one from Rainer Maria Rilke. So if my previous guest, Elizabeth Weingarten, is listening, this one's for you. The quote goes like this: "Do not believe that he who seeks to comfort you lives untroubled among the simple and quiet words that sometimes do you good. His life has much difficulty and sadness, were it otherwise, he would never have been able to find those words." And with that, I thank you all for listening, and see you here next time.
Thank you for listening to Psychologists Off the Clock. You can now listen to our podcast ad-free by becoming a supporter on Patreon. You can link to Patreon on our website or go to patreon.com/offtheclocksite.
If you enjoy our podcast, you can help us out by leaving a review and sharing this episode with a friend or an enemy who would enjoy it.
You can get more psychology tips by subscribing to our fabulous newsletter on Substack. Or if you're still addicted to social media, find us on Instagram and LinkedIn.
We'd like to thank our rockstar production manager, Jadine Stout-Williams.
Now for the boring part. This podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only and is not meant to be a substitute for mental health treatment. If you're looking for mental health treatment, please visit the resources page of our website, offtheclockpsych.com.